basically Algonquins, were residents. The Capsi group of Canarsie, said to have sold Mannahatta for 60 guilders worth of trinkets, for which the deed was never found. And the Dutch West India Company, for goods worth $24, promptly applied the pale-face theory of ownership. Apoplectic livery, scourge of Mannahatta, vanishing there too. For 60 guilders worth of trinkets, don't we all literally live in huts? Thanks, everybody. This is a poem, another more recent poem that is on the Poetry Foundation website. It's called Pronoun Circle Jerk and the Dog Charlie. Maybe you've been in one of these pronoun circle jerks before. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull it up here. Okay. Pronoun circle jerk and the dog Charlie. I had scarcely got acquainted when they took me by the paw and made me even-minded, nor did I mind. I had exactly enough window. I had exactly enough to get started. Wine makes a person weak. That is not to say that wine is not delightful, only that it makes a person weak. A person can be made weak with whiskey. And this was the Mexicans' military tactic with the Chiricahua Apache and the Dutch with the Lenape down in Mannahatta. There was a dog named Charlie. Callie called it an it when we had our pronoun circle jerk. I told the group they could call me it, you know, like the sky and the grass and a bird where you can't tell what it is. It's itself. Then I sort of chickened out and said, if it made them feel weird as a pronoun for a human, they could call me they, or any gender neutral pronoun. I said Z or Zay or E or Shim Sham or two head cocks and a click, I joked. Looking at Charlie's belly as Charlie rolled on its back. So I'm going to read some new poems now. Thank you. This is I'm in Philadelphia right now, as I mentioned. And normally I live in California, so I'm sort of a fish out of water. This is the poem I first wrote, my first poem that I wrote when I got here last summer. It's called In the Source of the Scene. In the source of the scene, I took to oversplain. With fish and flower and sullen sparrows did I disport, calmly walking upon the tide. Heel of my shoe betide upon my shoe. Yeah, that's what I said. Heel of my shoe betide upon my shoe. Before the boring marrow of my heart. I mean, one to flick ash into. No, I mean boring, like boring into. As in like eyes of Gomorrah coal, the ones you'd want to cook your pizza. Hey, take my hand. Let's pretend it isn't the plague. Is that egregious to say plague? Well, some friends of mine, I could say, are not the same. The ceremony of sparrows aflutter in the pear tree, fuck, the shit in the road and the contrast of it all, teaching me what I like. There's a salty penny on my tongue and a rose struck through my ear, and I'm in the sultry air under a throbbing and dribbling AC. Yay, and my heart's in my hands again. You'll laugh, I know. but I'm done feeling churlish for my ways. I listened to how the tambourines were like to roar, but failing that, were content to jingle jangle. Because that I was raised up on money, and for the lack of it as a child, can you dance me? And can you dance me just so with my feet upon your feet? Well, you saw the poetry in it when I didn't. No, I saw the poetry in it too. Who am I kidding? Certainly not you. Because it's you I love, you I love, you I love. Take me out for ice cream. I don't want to burn things down anymore, even the shitty Froyo place. I'm going to say what I want from now on, not what I don't want. Turns out the most fucked up looking Fenders are the most expensive. I mean, the Fender guitars. They call it heavy relic, like a telly or a Strat with the paint rubbed away. I used to call this false antiquity and decried it in jeans, but I gotta admit, I'm pretty into this relicking look on a guitar. Why would you listen to me? I'm up here. Why would you listen to me? I got a mic in that backbeat, baby, 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 baby. Tell me something I don't know. I'm tired of hearing the wind through a tiny aperture. Tell me a thing I haven't thought of. Like how sithens with a net you seek to catch the wind. I can fleek utterly and utterly. Show me how to pump my dick till it's as savage as a clit. Show me the underlining of your rail guards. Show me your skin. I'll trade all of my saguaros for a single come what may. The clouds are nectarine pink. I should just stop right now. I've been thinking a lot about Thich Nhat Hanh since he died recently, the great Buddhist master teacher. And I always think about something he said about how you should perform every action just as carefully as you were giving the baby Buddha a bath. And I think that's so beautiful. I think about it all the time. So that thought sort of comes into this poem. It's called Skyhammer. Skyhammer. I took out my skyhammer and pounded out a few choice clouds, Cirrus and I don't know, Nimbus, as in a god on earth, moving in space in a great auroral mist. The god who beholds the sparrows washing in the dusty gravel of Frankfurt Avenue. God, I miss Cali. And there's a fire in the hills above Goleta, north of Refugio, causing me to rant or giving me means to roll or ride with me in the shadowy, spidery afterworld, beyond the spider of a doubt, along a sidewalk littered with leaves. Don't be plain, said the cloud. Find you the ornament that pleased you best, or elsewise, sugared in stars, go on and rail in a useless manner against the inevitable dawn time. People of the dawn come up drumming and beat on a pillow even when a drum is not available. Happy fortune. Fortune has come round for you again. In this pocket world of a minor horned god, I balanced my lunch in the arms of my ancestors, tom cord grapes and weeping cherries. They were my arms, lackadaisic in the sky, 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 holding their sky hammer as if it was the baby Buddha. But really, I want to be honest. I was in a rose garden with no roses in an outhouse called the Royal Flush. And I thought, if there was a world beyond, I could become one of those assholes who gets their sugar from fruit and regard the one who points out my faults as a revealer of treasures. The rules of the game. Thank you. We'd agreed to be bound by the rules of the game, with bouncing diamonds and orange clouds and the tiny melodeons in the back of the truck honking out a seamless tune, and the pegs in the player piano mindlessly placed, nevertheless seductive. Make a tune worth singing. The sun peeked out with its single eye behind a slate blue triangle. When I loved you, mine eye too was single. The heart of the sovereign part of me beaming. I could pretend I lived in the Arconia, a building with a doorman, and that the piano played only the notes I chose for it. Sometimes I fell upon my enemies with lust. Sometimes I brought them oysters and venison. Sometimes I pulled on an ochre rope and started the whole thing all over again. This is called Star Pocket. Ornament of the nebulon on which I rest my wrist. Pocket of stars. Outside the dream, but still dreaming. Dreaming I was being kissed by one I love, but who in real life doesn't love me. A way to feel high. I looked up how to get drunk without drinking. I talked about soaking a tampon in booze. That wasn't what I meant. Parmanji said, get intoxicated with God. I make my prayer and it's not a sacrifice. Impulse to order things, to check the stats of things. Tick to click the box, lachrymose. Bargain my saneness, my senescence for a handful of likes. And lo did I this very hour walk down on a street called Columbus to a real river at Shakamaxon, the site of a treaty where we said we would live in love with one another as long as the creek should flow. Pilgrim's promise, the promise of the lover, and like the promise of other lovers, one that was writ on water. Dream lover goes to waste. Creeks undergrounded into sewers. Ripping up my heart, I found it pleasantly embalmed. Ripping up my heart, I found it pleasantly embalmed. Discordian, apart from its network, feeding on fumes. Another poet writes about its heart in a poem that says, look at me, pick me. But where the poet has been long suffering, the poem just slaps a capo on itself and sings in a different key. New note, new ostensible heart. It's dark. It may freeze tonight. The poet labors over its poem. The poet is alighted with its situation. It may freeze. It may freeze. The basils and the cilantros that it planted in the planter it drug in from the street are still alive in the marrow of its mild suffering. And the letter that peeked out of the mailbox, a love long alighted. And the part of its heart the poet had put on ice, defrosting in the palm of its own hand. The new cigarette. Pine of the times, and of my erstwhile elephantine heart, crying brutal tears while stabbing in its own breast, like the pelican was said to have done, to feed its blood to its young. or La Llorona wandering the plain, weeping her estate. Children drown, love forlorn and forsaken, and herself merely a spirit in a diaphanous wilderness. Or Nunashish with a cry like a whippoorwill, lonesome whippoorwill of Hank Williams' song, who can somehow sing but not weep. No, not like that, nor like Ernest Tubb walking the floor, but like a fox pouncing on a purple urchin under the sea with a certainty and with a lavish success. Elsewise, quarterwise, a habit was just a thing I wore, exultant grave upon my body, longing for death in metal stirrups, and lambs punctuated with brief aplomb. Oh, a plum in my side saddle. Let's pull it out and stick our tongue in it, baby. Orion's junk is just below his belt, with variable stars not yet named. An eye in my handkerchief, an eye in my not quite wool hat, my cut-off gloves of yesteryear. But what makes these glove upon my wings? What makes these wings at my feet and at my wings? Or a drapery artfully placed, demure as a surf poncho, or merely a spirito with a common progress, a post-coital popsicle. Here's a little poem. Thank you, Maddie. Here's a little poem called Liquid Amber. This is a quiet poem. Haply did I delay the remnants of a room embossed with, let's just say it, stars. Flit of your cup, fluke of its pretext to milk, oaten. The cable for the mic should be short to enround in the sound, like dew shimmering on a pine needle, or a blue whale whose route could be called wanton or even vain, gregarious. There are certain spices that live in the mountain. We don't speak of them. And certain roads that eat their own dust happily. Thank you again so much for listening to these poems. I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to be able to share poetry with you and to be in this, albeit virtual space with you. So thank you, really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna read 3 more poems. And this one is called Blue Lotus. Blue Lotus. The eucalyptus is also called the blue gum. Blue is either the rarest or the commonest color in nature. On the leaf of the lotus, I beheld a drop of dew, which was a drop of glue on cut fabric. Verisimilitude, my one pleasure. Truth seeming was easier to get into because it was everywhere. Like the sea in its common blue breeches, like the sky in its common denim. Was there really any lotus at the Flying J rest stop or atop my head blossoming into 1,000 petals? The cock crowed all night while we were in the teepee, confused, we thought, by the full moon. Later, a coyote howled, self-satisfied, as its snack had announced itself. The leaves of the gum are like the water that surrounds a melting glacier. Blue's my favorite color, but I'm not unusual in that way. It sells magazines and jeans. We all live in the uncanny valley, common as star stuff. I don't care if you love me. There were 60-foot waves in Kauai today. My blood's blue in its veins, and I look good in my jeans. Blue like the sea, and blue like my people in the sea. If I could, I surely would. I could fly the ocean, but I could be a fly on the wall, or I could be a fly as hell, but to no great purpose, no witness from a silver plane. I could turn it all into purple prose, the prose that reveled in its circumambulations, as in circling a holy thing, as it moving sunwise around a holy thing, sacred entity circularly, or with a fascinator like a duchess, neither to any purpose perambulating into the swimming area. Duck at Pleasant Lake, or was it Lake Pleasant, who kept swimming into the swimming area? If I'd had the right shade of blue ink, or if I had Phthalo X11 or spectral or Uranian blue to grind into a dust, to make an ink, to make the neck of the duck shine, I could make it rain in California. I could make a hard and tender rain fall in California and soften the brittle twigs and coat the throat of my sweet fox. I could tell you what I really think. I could lift my heart up to the tune of Be My Lover by La Bouche. Be my lover, won't you be my lover? Or better yet, to Blue Moon as sung by Elvis, Take 4, where he almost yodels, where he employs his smooth falsetto to the clippity-clop percussion of what seems like horses, or like coconuts clapped together to sound like horses, trotting along in 4/4 time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, the way Monty Python done, wondering whether a swallow could carry the weight of a coconut. And I could eat the meat of that coconut and the dried sweet grapes of yestertime, and no one could stop me, and the wine would not be tinged with smoke, nor the forest singed past arboration. I could use the blueness to be no longer blue. If I could beat back the blues, if I could write, I could have written a poem, beaten blue by the blues, and in spite of the blues and its tinge upon the cuff of my brain, I could have been the best speller of them all, of any decade, and made it be known. But antediluvian, Ursprach, and Feldkreis would have taken me down because I bragged and needed to be brought low. Like how Ashka, Coyote, Let's Go of the Mouse had the Shumash tell it, bragging about how it outsmarted the mouse, and the mouse runs away when Ashka opens its mouth. When the coyote begins to brag, when it opens its mouth to brag, if I could have taken some pleasure out of it, I might have sucked on the conch or blew on it in such a way as to make sound occur, a pleasurable sound, or one that could have called certain spirits forth, or beckoned loved ones to dinner, if we could have dinner, if we could share the air together and talk with each other with our very mouths. I'd cook a meal in 10 steps that could have been done in 4. I'd flay the skins of the vegetables myself and julienne them a la Julia, a la Julian. I'd pluck herbs from the garden I'd have and mince them so finely to sprinkle over the resultant spread. And I'd visit the cranberry bog of my long desire to see the native berries in their feral habitat, once cultivated, now wilded. And I'd scoop them up in a water somewhat fresh, in some ways salt, and that the berries too would be sweet, sour, salty, dripping in my palms. I could have tasted them, with the water clean enough to permit even an overbearing caretaker to allow their dog companion to dip its paws and then lick those paws. I would lick them. I would lick my paws and berries, the way the tongue would circle the beloved jewel of the star Antares, Antares that winks like the dark orchid of my asshole, or the gem of Arcturus, his genital shining in Bootes, herald of the eve in buttery yellow. I'd fall into the butter dish and revel there and carry gold like the sun nearing the money shot. Even in the East where such things are rare, there would be a beach Megansett Beach west facing, and a dune there where we could lie protected among the seagrass and the rose hips. Yes, yes, I would. And if I could, I would. And if I could, I surely would. Well, if I could, I surely would stand on that rock where someone or another stood. Rock with the remnants of ancient creatures who still hear with ears, who hear us yet with ossified ears, even as the soul of my estate, unhinged and maskless, but grander and canarier, was in the burning west. Even as the soul of my estate, unhinged and maskless, but grander and canarier, was in the burning west. When it bend its knee to pray, when it bend its knee to pray and says, what did you think? And what did you think? And I've been here before, and I've been standing here before, and I've been standing at your attention all along, and I've been kneeling here at your attention, been standing and kneeling at your attention, and I've been kneeling and standing unbeknownst to your attention all along, like that star you thought was the light of a house. Been there all along. It's been here this whole time, joking with you. And as you smoked, it too blew out a puff of smoke. And like the ochre mesas in the sunset, crouching like lions, been here all along, been here all along, been there all along, like when it bend its knee to pray, and when it bend its knee to pray, and when its song is in its throat, and when its heart is in its knee, and when its heart is in its knee, and when its heart is in its knee, and when its song is in its throat. Thank you. I'm gonna stop there. And I'd be happy to open it up to anybody who wants to drop a question in the chat or comment or speak out loud. Just go ahead and unmute yourself. Isn't that right, Abby?
Yeah, I definitely want to encourage everyone to drop questions in the chat, but also to turn your video camera on and unmute yourself if you're comfortable to just kind of be in this space and ask questions. I can kind of kickstart us off while people are maybe collecting their thoughts on kind of all of the collection of works that you've shared, Julian, and just ask about a lot of your work. It does touch on the way that like we read in your bio, that language and song function as medicine. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that and like what that means to you and kind of the importance of language in kind of in your song and artwork, like generally.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, and I think it sort of relates to the question that someone had put in the chat, what inspires you to write? And, you know, I think that like I live in this world through language, and that's the way that I experience the world, like directly. And that's the thing that makes me feel alive to the world. And it took me a while of like moving through life to realize that not everybody is that way. You know, I hear a word and it's almost like less an inspiration than a compulsion, you know, like I always carry my little notebook around and I'm constantly writing things down in it. You know, it's like a magpie, like, you know, picking up like pretty objects. I'm like collecting little words and phrases. You know, my dad's a piano teacher. I grew up playing piano, and then at a certain point I picked up the guitar and I realized, you know, if I could learn 3 chords, then I could like make songs. Like all I needed to do was learn how to make a G, C, and a D chord, and then I could like do anything. And so then I sort of became introduced to the beauty of being able to marry words and melodies. And that has been such a rich experience too. And, you know, I really think of my poems as songs also. Like you can hear in them that they have a melody, and sometimes my poems are songs, and sometimes the songs are poems. And so I try to think of them, or I do think of them as being on a spectrum of the same type of art form, you know, time-based media. And I do it like personally, just like in a really literal way, like songs and poems have healed me and have saved me and have kept me alive. Like it's not a metaphor, it's like it's really literal that like that music is medicine. And I was raised up that way, to think of song as medicinal, both like in ceremony and like in the popular culture. Yeah, I hear that, Kevin, about compulsion. I mean, compulsion makes it sound like something negative, but really, like I feel maybe like being maybe compelled, or driven. It's almost like there's something that is in you that you like have to externalize it, and sometimes it's not just enough to externalize it on the page. Like it really, I feel like it becomes complete when I have an opportunity like this to really share it with other people, and hopefully make you feel good in your night, or give you a different kind of thought than you had before. And that is really the completeness of being a poet or being a musician, is being able to give it. It's a gift. I mean, I think of it that way. It's a gift that I've received, and something that I would like to be able to give, and hopefully have that be medicine, or make someone feel good with it in the smallest way.
And that's actually kind of related to one of the other questions in the chat. What message do you hope others take away from your poetry? And maybe there's multiple there, but just to kind of speak to that.
Oh yeah, thank you for that, Cynthia. Yeah, no particular message. I wanted to say, like, I hope to put you in a trance, but but I didn't want you to think I was trying to feed you a particular message. Like, I think the beauty of it is that language is so flexible and so malleable, and any word, the word loneliness, means something so different to everyone. And we all come with our own experiences and ways that we are going to feel that word, or different emotions that it might arouse in us. And so, like, I hope to like take you along a path on a journey, like almost like a guided meditation, and so that you can experience that poem, that song, in like every way is correct. Like I don't subscribe to the idea that, in literary criticism, where you sort of like can crack open a poem and then you like can extract some kind of jewel or meaning from it. Like, I don't want that. There's not a meaning. Whatever you experience from the poem is correct. Does that make sense?
It does definitely make sense, at least for me. And I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I definitely resonated with that perspective. Maddie had a question in the chat. How do you find the power to be so vulnerable in your work? And I mean, I think we definitely got to see a lot of vulnerability there, which was awesome.
Thank you, Maddie. That question really speaks to me, because I've always really been interested in how embarrassing poetry is. Like, just how, like, just even being a poet is such almost like a ridiculous thing in our culture. And, and I think it's changing, but when I was like coming up, it really felt like it was not a thing you could aspire to be, or like a legitimate job, or like I was embarrassed to call myself a poet. I thought all poets were like white men in the 19th century. I didn't realize that like medicine people were poets and that other types of people were poets. And so I was always really attracted to the like embarrassing aspect of poetry. Like I knew it was like, and I would secretly write my poems when I was a kid. And I saved my allowance and I bought like a box that locked, and in that box I would put my cigarettes and my poems, and I like kept the key so close to me, and there's something so thrilling about like how embarrassing poetry was. Like, that's where I put all my like secret crushes and deepest emotions and fears, and so there's something almost like so like thrilling to me about that vulnerability. And the guise of poetry, the fact that it's like performance and like an art form, gives me like just enough distance where it's like it's me and it isn't me. and it is me and it isn't me, it's like me in the moment. And, what I really want with my poems is, like I said at the beginning, I want to give you my heart. Like for me, this is like pure love. And like, and when I'm performing or reading, it's like I want to just give everything away. And that is like, paradoxically, that feeds me. If I'm able to give you my heart, if I'm able to just communicate even a glimmer of a part of a corner of my heart, and that can reach you, then I'm so fulfilled. So being vulnerable isn't like a scary thing. It's actually something that's why I do it, because I want to be vulnerable, because it's a way of loving. For me, it's really about love. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's true.
I feel like, we've gotten to connect with you tonight in a way that we know that like it might sound cheesy, but that you genuinely like mean it and it's coming from that true place. So thank you for that too. Another question that I had that I thought I would pose to you is just kind of, in addition to being this amazing artist, you are also, right, like a scholar too. You have your PhD and all of that. And like, how do you think about your relationship between your identity as an artist and your identity as a scholar? And how do some of your other identities intersect in those spaces to kind of inform that relationship? Because I know that's, usually seen as kind of competing.
Yeah, and I definitely like feel like a scholar at this point, but I'm not an academic anymore. I'm a failed academic. Like I left academia when I couldn't, after I got my PhD, I didn't find a job, and so in a way I was like so mad about it at the time, but like in a way it was such a blessing because it really pushed me more towards focusing on trying to be an artist, even though that is like seemingly an impossible task, but I still am doing it. And being an artist and a scholar is, artists are scholars. They're scholars of their particular medium. And, my doctoral work was on rhyme. My dissertation was actually on rhyme and poetry. Like cat, fat, rat, mat, that type of rhyme. And I was interested in that, in everything from like Apache ceremony and song to like medieval and Renaissance poetry, mixed language poetry, and contemporary rap and hip hop, which is, the most interesting place in which rhyme is being used now. Not even really by poets per se, but by rap artists. And so, my scholarly work is right now I'm working on sort of a pan-Indian poetics that deals with some of these same things around like vocalization. So there, it's just a way of like loving poetry and being able to kind of delve more deeply into that. But I had to admit that like writing prose is not my forte. And after writing a dissertation, I kind of like took a break from writing sentences for many years. I love to write poetry, but I really don't like writing prose, which I think is sort of a problem for being like a real academic. They expect you to write sentences that like follow and make sense.
I definitely. Oh, sorry, I did not mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just saying I can definitely relate to that. I think folks who, are taking classes, writing long papers and things like that can relate to that. Sometimes writing sentences is just not happening. We have one more question in the chat before we close up for the night. What role do you think your identities have played in your art?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, to be honest, like I'm like a whole person, you know what I mean? Like I'm not just my identities, and but they are me, and they're not separatable from who I am. So they'll spark through just the way that I'm like, I'm like a foodie, or like I'm a Scorpio, like, these sort of like aspects of myself will come through like in a holistic way, and I'm not really trying to like, write the gay trans mixed race, like I'm not trying to write in that way. And I'm not really into like being identity forward in my work. I prefer to it sort of like arise naturally just out of like my being, um, and so like I think of like my identities as less like a subject matter than like just, as if I'm like a gem, like facets of my aspect that are, however, like I turn the gem around, things are gonna shine through when I can't help that. That's me.
Thank you for that. I really like the visual of gems with different facets that, it's all one gem. I am gonna turn it over to get some announcements before we close up for the night. But thank you so much for answering our questions.
Thank you for the questions.
Yes, thank you for that. I really like the visual of gems with different facets that, it's all one gem. I am gonna turn it over to get some announcements before we close up for the night. But thank you so much for answering our questions.
Thank you very much for
thank you for that. I really like the visual of gems with different facets that, it's all one gem. I am gonna turn it over to get some announcements before we close up for the night. But thank you so much for answering our questions.
Thank you very much for
thank you for that. I really like the visual of gems with different facets that, it's all one gem. I am gonna
I apologize. Well, after that, thank you so much. I want to say thank you so much to our guest, Julian Talamantes Velasquez. Everybody give a great virtual round of applause for its amazing poetry and its work, and for spending this evening with us tonight. I want to say thank you so much for attending this event. To all of our students and JHU affiliates. I want to thank LGBTQ Life and Gender Identity, as well as the Women and Gender Resources Office on behalf of JHU Multicultural Affairs. Please look out for our upcoming events during the month of February as we celebrate Black History Month with our Heritage 365 initiative signature programs, including our cultural experience with poet LaDawn Osman on February 10th on Zoom, Identity Through Art with Stephen Newbold on February 23rd. In the DNI Lounge at Homewood Apartments, I want to promote our speaker series with Crystal Valentine on February 24th in Mudd Auditorium. You can RSVP to all of these events on the Office of Multicultural Affairs campus groups, and further keep up with our student engagement activities, events, outreach, and opportunities by following us on Instagram at JHUOMA_. You can also support Julian Velasquez's work by purchasing its recent book of Mongrelitude, which is in the link in the chat. And you can also support its music, which played at the beginning of tonight's presentation on Spotify by searching Juan in the Pines. The link is also in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.